Thank you so much for tuning into Latino Politics and News, our multi-platform broadcast. I am Tony Diaz, El Traficante, and we're very happy to be joined by Rochelle Garza. She is the Democratic nominee for Texas Attorney General. First of all, thank you so much for taking the time on a great day for block walking. So I hope folks are doing that around the state and take the time to talk to us, Rochelle. So welcome.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's always good to be in
And
in
we're going to
Houston.
share some facts about you. That's awesome. And we're going to share information too, but we're going to start off at the top by debunking some myths that are being conveyed in this political race, specifically about you and some of the commercials that your opponent has aired. I want to make it clear that we've several times reached out to the campaign of the incumbent, Ken Paxton, and we've invited him to be on the show. We've invited him to go out where he is, and we have not got any response. It seems that that's the same treatment that Telemundo Univision have gotten. That's a shame. We're very happy that you've been open to meet with us and that you want to talk to the community. And again, I do want to get to information about your trajectory because you make us proud because you're a Latina running for office statewide and you're doing great work. Also, I want to talk about how important it is to have folks from our community representing us, especially as the population changes. But I also want to start with the more direct attack ads that have been out there, if we may, if that's okay with you, Rochelle.
Yeah, that's fine. We can address that.
So there are myths about all Democrats, and I never actually have heard a Democrat complain on a platform for open borders. To me, personally, that sounds like a right-wing stereotype, but I've heard that in ads for Ken Paxton. What are your thoughts on this claim? So
Well,
one of the
first,
claims that doesn't seem to have a basis in reality is this whole idea of an open borders campaign strategy, which, as I've said many times, I've never heard any candidate from the Democratic Party campaign on that or talk about that as a policy. I've only heard that from right-wing campaigns.
yeah, it seems like the border is always in the news when it comes to election time. I am from the border. First and foremost, I'm a fifth generation Tejana from the Rio Grande Valley. I started off my legal career as an
What are your
immigration
thoughts
lawyer,
on that?
and
And I'll let you
I
speak on
under,
screen.
and I understand the complexities of immigration law. I know what it's like to be someone from the border. I have family members that work in border enforcement, and Ken Paxton is just lying. He is straight up lying about my position, about Democrats. It's really a copy paste kind of argument that we're seeing come out of the Republican Party, but especially someone like Ken Paxton. And it is a complete distraction from his failures. He has completely failed in his position, in his job to stop human trafficking. He has $3 million at his disposal, and he has only closed maybe 5 cases. So in the last 2 years. So he is someone that is weak on crime, and he wants to use my community, the border community, to divide us. And it's abhorrent, it's ridiculous, and it's frustrating because we deserve better than to have a criminally indicted attorney general representing Texas. It's an embarrassment. So I'm running to fight for all of us to make sure that we are protecting Texas families and that we have this office returned to the people of Texas, that it is one that has integrity and transparency and actually fights for voting rights, reproductive rights, consumer protections, and child support, and doing all of the things that the office should be doing instead of engaging in these political stunts, this political grandstanding that we've seen come out of Ken Paxton. Because our communities are not any safer with him in office. He is only dangerous for our families and for the state of Texas.
You mentioned you're a immigration attorney, so as you alluded to, you obviously have a really good idea of all the policies that are in place that do work, that don't work, and how they could be shaped to help Texas get workers that they need, protects families. So I do want to talk about that a little later in the interview, but I also want to talk about another attack for the Ken Paxton campaign that I've seen commercials for, where they have and I want to add one other thing. This is me editorializing, is that I've seen several right wing Republican candidates bring Latinos into their ads, but it really seems that the only time Latinos appear in their campaign is as victims when they've been hurt in terrible ways. And then to me, that seems like I'd like to see Republicans address our community profoundly. On that note, there's one particular commercial, and my heart goes out to this. It's a woman whose husband was a border patrol agent, and he passed away, evidently, from what I could tell in the commercial. And she is then saying certain things about statements that you had made about border patrol agents. And I've seen that in other Ken Paxton commercials. I'd like to give you a chance to address those attacks if you can.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is just Ken Paxton lying. I mean, those are it's slander and it's full of lies. It's frustrating, right? It's frustrating to see him use a Latina in this way, to use our own community to divide us. As I said earlier, I have family that has worked in enforcement. I'm from the Rio Grande Valley. And one of the ways that people get into the middle class, the most available jobs, is working in border enforcement, is working at detention centers. It's a complicated matter, but our communities have been making it work, really. And to have someone like Ken Paxton, who has no idea what it's like to be from the border, no idea what it's like to be Latino, no idea what it's like to even care about Texas, using this is really disappointing. It's abhorrent, and it's slander.
I, I really appreciate you coming on our show to talk about this. And I really wish Ken Paxton would address these issues with our community, because for me, it appears that the campaigns are meant to divide us, use stereotypes, generalizations against our community, and to profile us. So I really wish he would sit down with us or other Latino news outlets and walk through those profiles, address those, and not just have Latinos who are victims exploited for his campaign purposes. So it means a lot to me for you to come on and address those hard questions. And I don't want to give him more fair airtime, especially because he has not accepted our invitation. So I want to talk more about you. So I want to now read your bio. Rochelle Garza is a fronteriza, attorney, and lifelong fighter for the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas. She has spent her career fighting for the civil rights of children, immigrants, and families. Garza's taken on Justice Brett Kavanaugh when, as a federal judge, he decided against Jane Doe, a teen in an immigration detention who was denied the right to choose. Her work on that case resulted in the Garza Notice, which requires that detained teens be notified of their right to abortion, free of retaliation and obstruction by the federal government. Garza graduated from the University of Houston Law Center and from Brown University with honors. She lives in Brownsville with her husband, Adam, and their daughter and their dog, Ramses. Congratulations on your success. To me, you're a Latina pedigree, because you the community. your amazing accomplishments, you could be banking in the corporate world. You know, with all your experience, why have you chosen to run for office? And I don't know if you would have imagined this campaign getting as nasty as it has been. And that's my editorial, that it's getting nasty for some of the reasons we just mentioned. What made you want to run for office instead of just making a ton of money in a corporate office?
Yeah, I've spent my career fighting for families and for children and for immigrants and everyone that has really been the victim of the powerful. I grew up in South Texas. My parents were both public school teachers. That's how they met. But my dad had a really incredible life story where he went from being a poor farmer, one of 13 kids, to becoming a teacher, to becoming a lawyer, and then a judge. And hard work was instilled in me. Hard work and the importance of public service, the importance of advocacy, because I also grew up with a sibling with disabilities. My brother Robbie experienced a brain injury during childbirth, and he couldn't walk, he couldn't talk, he couldn't see, but he knew our voices and felt our love because we advocated for him at every turn. And whether that was driving 4 hours north to San Antonio to make sure he saw specialists, or my mom testifying in Austin against a bill that would have been harmful to families like ours. That's what we had to do as a family. That's why I became a lawyer. That's why I practiced civil rights, because I truly believe that we are all equal under the law and that we should be pushing the envelope. The law is a tool. It can either build or it can destroy, and I want to build with it. That's why I decided to run for office. That's why I decided to run for this position in particular, because I have dealt with Ken Paxton in the past. I have seen what the extreme right could be. I took on a case of a young woman, Jane Doe, who needed access to abortion care and was denied that care because she was in immigration detention. The Trump administration came after her, Ken Paxton came after her, and Judge Brett Kavanaugh, who is now sitting on the Supreme Court, made a decision against her that would have forced her to have a child against her will. The fact that we were able to stand up for Jane, made sure she got the care she needed, and defeat all these guys was an incredible feat, an incredible testament to what one person and the people that care about this person can do. The Garza Notice is a result of that. It's a notice that is given to teens across this country that find themselves in immigration detention, and essentially they are allowed to exercise their abortion decisions even today. So if they find themselves in Texas, they are moved to another state where they can enact their decision. And I'm proud of that. I am proud of that because that case, the Jane Doe case, was about saying immigrants aren't people under the law, that they don't have constitutional rights. It was about chipping away at reproductive rights and saying women are second-class citizens and they don't have rights. And, we were successful in 2017 and 2018. And right now the game has changed, and I knew that it was going to happen. So that's why I jumped into this race. I jumped into this race for my daughter. She is 7 months old now. I was pregnant and I ran into the fire and into this race to make sure that we defeated criminally indicted Ken Paxton, because he has done nothing but harm our families and our communities and abused his power. So this is the race that we can win. I mean, this is the closest statewide race, and it is a Latina from the border that's going to get it done.
Now, Ken Paxton has been a big supporter of Donald Trump and vice versa. So, what are your thoughts on his actions in that he has not that the last presidential election was a fair election? Additionally, he has not profusely renounced the insurrection on January 6th at the Capitol. Um, does Are those part of what a Texas Attorney General should be doing, and what are your thoughts on those actions for his part?
Yeah, and just to be very clear on what Ken Paxton has done. So Ken Paxton tried to overturn the 2020 election using Texas taxpayer dollars. He abused his law license to do that. He was the warm-up act for Trump on the January 6th insurrection. He was in DC and he spoke to that crowd before they stormed the Capitol. And he's also refused to turn over any communications that had to do with that. This is the Attorney General of Texas, the top legal officer of our state. So he is someone that does not believe in democracy. In fact, he even further tried to use taxpayer dollars to meddle in the Mar-a-Lago documents scandal with Trump, and he brought Trump down here to campaign with him. So Ken Paxton has completely aligned himself with Trump and with this anti-democratic movement. And the fact that he is the Attorney General of our state is incredibly dangerous because he has a beeline to the Supreme Court. He can pick whatever court he wants in the state of Texas, take it to the Fifth Circuit, the most conservative circuit court in the country, and go up to the Supreme Court where he has all the votes that he wants. So if he wants to change things, if he wants to undo voting rights or make further challenges to voting rights, he can do that because he's got the courts on his side. So it's incredibly important that we unseat him. But the very best part is the fact that we are so close. I have been consistently polling within that margin of error within 2 points. And the first time we polled within 2 points back in August, Ken Paxton sent a letter to elections officials across the state of Texas, telling them that they should open up the ballots to inspection to whomever requests it, including the day after the election. This is against state and federal law that requires our ballots to be secure for 22 months. He's literally asking people to break the law. So we need to unseat this man because he is dangerous for the state of Texas. He will rig an election if it comes to that. That is my concern. My concern is what happens on November 9th. So that's why it's so important that everyone get out and vote, because this election is going to decide the future of our democracy, and it's going to decide the future of Texas.
And we've talked a lot about Ken Paxton and what he has done here. Again, we've invited him several times to the show. I would love to have a discussion with him to rebuttal and talk about some of these issues. He's rejected that. So I want to talk more about your work because it's important that a Latina run, but I also think it's an insult for people to think that I would just support you because you're Latina. I love that you're Latina. However, you're smart, you're talented, you know the community. Tell us what programs you would pursue, what policies you would pursue as Texas Attorney General.
Yeah, I have a vision of restoring this office to the people of Texas, to doing the job. I want to have a fully funded civil rights division. It's a bold vision where we're going to protect the safety, the privacy, and the dignity of every single Texan. And we're going to do that through a voting rights unit, through a reproductive rights unit, through an LGBTQ plus unit, a disability rights unit. We're going to make sure that Texans in this state have their rights respected. And it begins with civil rights, because the erosion of rights always begins with the most marginalized. And if you don't believe in one civil right, you don't really believe in any civil rights at all. So that's why I have focused my campaign on this issue in particular, because it's not just reproductive rights that are on the chopping block. It's also marriage equality. It's also contraception. It's all of the rights that can fall if we're not protecting all of them, right? So I also want to make sure that we have a workers' protection bureau where we're liaising with unions and making sure that we encourage and we support our union members in this state, that we stop the misclassification of workers and wage theft, and that we get back to basics when it comes to consumer protection. You know, the Attorney General's office used to do a lot of work to protect consumers across this state. And there have been multiple examples of this, of you know, making sure that there are products that are not unsafe for children, for babies. And the glaring example that I have, that we all have in front of us, is the fact that the power grid failed. The fact that there were several hundred people, unfortunately, that passed away as a result, that there were people that experienced complete financial ruin, and no one has been held accountable. The Attorney General should have done something. And for me in this position, that would be a priority, is making sure we are investigating price gouging, that we hold people accountable for what happened with the power grid failure, and that we stop the fact that we as consumers are paying for what happened, because the power companies that experience losses, they're making us pay for it. So that's why everyone is seeing this hike in their energy bill. That's why I saw an energy bill of over $500, even though I hadn't been home for 2 months because I've been traveling the state. So that is going to be a priority for me, is making sure that we take care of Texans in every facet of their lives, because it's time that we have a true people's lawyer that is going to work with Texans and for every Texan.
You mentioned the power grid. Of course, we've been having some connection issues right now, and I appreciate you rolling with the punches. I will say this as an aside. We've never had connection issues before. We're talking about who runs the power grid. It's very odd that the one time we're chatting with you, all of a sudden things don't quite click. But we're going to roll with the punches because it's important to get the message out. I have one last question, and this is about an issue near and dear to my heart. I am a beneficiary of the American dream through education. Myself and my colleagues, we fought a lot for Mexican American studies, ethnic studies, and for education. Some folks may say education doesn't fall exactly under the duties of a Texas Attorney General. If we had time, I could go into places where I thought Ken Paxton was hurting the educational system. Any reflections that you may want to share regarding the role of education in the American dream, or maybe your experience with any courses that help you know about your community or culture?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't be here without having a public education. But more than that, you know, my parents wouldn't be who they are without having gone to school. You know, I mentioned earlier that my dad was one of 13 children growing up in South Texas, and that he was a farmer. He was a poor farmer. They picked cotton and okra and tomatoes, and for him, it was school that gave him the vision to become who he became, to become a judge by the age of 30. That's absolutely incredible. And it was people along the way in his schooling. And I remember him telling me stories of, you know, his school nurse that would save shoes for him because they couldn't afford shoes. Um, Education is absolutely important, and I support public education. And we need to stop defunding our schools. We absolutely need to stop defunding them. And although as Attorney General, I wouldn't have a heavy hand in any of the shaping of education, what I can say is that I can be a big supporter, and I can advocate for public schools, and that I could advocate for local communities to make sure that they have access to, the students have access to books, because the thing is, we have Ken Paxton, who likes to go after local communities that are just trying to do the right thing for their constituencies. And that's not something that I would support as Attorney General. I want to be a partner to people across the state, especially our counties and cities and school boards that are just trying to make sure that our students are educated, and that they know true history, because that is absolutely important. You can't move forward in life, you can't move forward in this world without knowing where you come from and knowing your personal history, your community's history, but history as a general matter, because all of Latino history, Mexican American history, all of that is part of American history. So you know, I'm that's my position on all of that, and I'm very supportive of our public education system.
Well, really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, especially on a Saturday, as early voting has begun throughout the state. And as we get closer to Election Day, could you kindly give people your website and how they can keep track of where you're at and maybe some of your positions and any breaking news?
Yeah, so if folks want to learn more about my campaign, they can go to Rochelle Garza for Texas.com. It's all spelled out. You can learn more there. I'm on all of the social media platforms, Rochelle M. Garza. You're going to see me as Rochelle Mercedes Garza on the ballot. I am the only Latina, the only woman of color on the statewide slate for the executive ticket, Democrat or Republican. And when elected, I will be the first woman and first Latina to ever be elected as Attorney General. And I am so humbled and proud to be in this position. And I hope that I will serve all of us well as the next Attorney General. So thank you for having me on. And, you know, it's always a pleasure to be in Houston. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We've been talking to Rochelle Garza, who is the Democratic candidate for Texas Attorney General. Thank you so much for pushing so hard for public service.
Thank
Thanks.
you.